The morning air is crisp as I make my way down to the distillery, the fog hanging lower over the Whitewater Canal like a blanket. It's early, barely light out, but I've always been one to rise before the sun. There's work to be done, whiskey to move, and it won't wait for me. I can already tell the mash fermenting, that sweet, pungent scent that lets me know the process is coming along just right. It fills the distillery, a comforting reminder that things are in order. I've been at this for years. Learned it from my father, who learned it from his father before him. There's something about distilling whiskey that feels almost ancient. It's a craft that takes patience and care, and I like to think we do it right here in Lawrenceburg. Some folks say we're related to the Daniels family down in Tennessee. Maybe we are. Maybe we aren't. It doesn't much matter. What matters is that my whiskey is good, and people know it. I've been using the copper still for as long as I can remember, heating the mash just right, letting the vapors rise and condense into something smooth, something worth drinking. Lawrenceburg itself has a history almost as rich as the whiskey I make. Settled back in 1802 by Captain Samuel C. Vance, a hero from the Revolutionary War, the town is one of Indiana's oldest. Vance named it in honor of his wife, and since then it's grown into a vital stop along the canal. The first house in town was a double log cabin built by Dr. Jabez Percival that same year. I always marvel at how the town has evolved over the years, from the days when the Jesse Hunt Hotel was built, the first 3-story building in Indiana, they say, to now. And that hotel, it's still standing, still welcoming travelers just like it did back in 1818. Today, though, isn't about making whiskey. It's about getting it to where it needs to go. The barrels are stacked neatly, each one filled with the amber liquid that's been aging for the better part of a year in charred oak barrels. The smell of the wood and whiskey permeates the air, a reminder of the craft that's gone into each batch. Now, these barrels are primed for the journey east towards the Ohio state line. Cincinnati has always been one of my oldest and most dependable markets. The people there have an appreciation for fine whiskey, and the city's proximity to Lawrenceburg makes it a key stop for me. Lately, though, the city's been trying to cut off Lawrenceburg from some of its commerce by lowering tolls, making it easier and cheaper to head into Ohio. At first glance, this seems like a good business for me. I can ship my barrels across the state line without too much cost, but the trick is coming back. That's a different story. Once I've sold my product, the return trip costs me more in tolls, a calculated move by Cincinnati to benefit themselves. It's almost like they're luring in merchants like me, knowing that while I'll save money on the way there, I'll be paying them back double to return. Still, I can't complain too much. The strategy may be frustrating, but it's hard to turn down a market that's always eager for more of my whiskey. Cincinnatians know quality when they taste it, and every trip, despite the tolls, is worth it for the profit I make and the reputation my whiskey builds across state lines. My apprentice, Isaac, helps me load the barrels onto the cart. He's a farm boy, eager to learn the trade, and he's got potential. Reminds me of myself when I was younger, full of energy and questions. We work in silence, mostly, save for the creaking of the cart's wheels as it rolls it down towards the canal. It's a peaceful morning, but there's a buzz of activity around the canal as other merchants and farmers go about their business, loading their goods onto boats bound for other towns along the way. Today, we're transporting a modest load, just 8 barrels, each one weighing close to 500 pounds. That's nearly 2 tons of whiskey, ready for the journey to north. The cost of moving these barrels is about 15 cents for the one-way trip to the border, a fair price considering the distance. Of course, it's not just the whiskey that needs to be accounted for. Isaac and I will be traveling with the goods, and the canal charges an extra 5 cents per person for passage. By the time all the tolls are added up, it'll be between 65 cents to maybe a little over $1 for both of us to make the trip, just part of the cost of doing business in this region. Still, it's a price I'm willing to pay to keep the whiskey flowing and the profits rolling in. The Whitewater Canal has been a blessing for folks like me. Before it was finished, we had to haul our whiskey overland. Miserable. That took twice as long and caused more headaches than I care to remember. But the canal, it changed everything. Now we can move goods with ease. get them where they need to go without worrying about mud-soaked roads or stuck wagons. The boat's already waiting at the dock, flat-bottomed and sturdy, perfect for transporting my whiskey. As we tie down the barrels, Isaac looks at me, a question in his eyes. "How long do you think it will take us this time, Mr. Schneider?" he asks. I glance up at the sky, squinting at the clouds. 3 days, maybe 4, if we're lucky with the weather. But the canal's got a mind of its own. We'll see. The pace on the canal is usually relaxed. Nobody's in much of a hurry, and the speed limit isn't strictly enforced. But as we get closer to the Ohio border, things start to change. The traffic picks up. Boats, carts, and people all gives way to a bustling, unpredictable flow of movement. Getting through that stretch takes patience, but with any luck, we'll be across before the congestion slows us down too much. I've made this journey countless times, and every time it feels like a new adventure. There's something about the slow, steady pace of the canal that calms me, even when the weather doesn't cooperate. And the camaraderie, it's good. You get to know the boatmen, and the other traders, share stories, trade goods, watch out for one another. It's not always easy, but it's honest work. And there's a certain satisfaction in knowing that the barrels you've spent months perfecting are making their way to someone who will appreciate every drop. Lawrenceburg's changed a lot since the canal was completed in 1838. The canal basin at Elm Street brought in mills and new businesses eager to use the water's power. But with the railroad coming, the canal might not last forever. I've seen the rise of the Baltimore and Ohio Southwestern Railroad, which started up in 1848, and the Whitewater Valley Railroad is going to be finished soon. The town's built to survive, even with all the changes. It's grown and adapted. You can see it in the buildings. Greek Revival architecture took hold in the 1830s and has stayed popular through, but seems to be shriveling out. And now we've got styles like the Italianate and Queen Anne popping up around town. The Dearborn County Courthouse and the Hamline Chapel are fine examples of craftsmanship, and I admire their lasting presence. Once the boat's loaded, I take a moment to breathe in the scent of the water mixing into the earthy aroma of the barrels. The canal stretches out before us, winding its way eastward towards Ohio. There's a long journey ahead, but I don't mind. I lean against the railing as the boat begins to drift, watching Lawrenceburg fade into the distance. The town's grown a lot since the canal opened, and I like to think I've grown with it. As we move further down the canal, we approach the first lock, sitting just beyond a triangle-shaped pond that's become a familiar sight on these trips. The lock's essential for raising or lowering the boat to match the canal's changing water levels, and it usually doesn't take too long to pass through. Still, there's a bit of a wait, around 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how many boats are ahead of us. The crew maneuvers the boat carefully into the lock chamber, and we sit still as the water fills or drains, slowly adjusting our position. Not far past the first lock, about a quarter mile or so down the canal, we'll hit a second lock. It's a shorter stretch, but it requires the same stop and wait process. It'll add another 15 minutes to the trip probably, but it's part of the routine now. These brief pauses give me a chance to reflect, check on Isaac, and make sure everything is in order before we really start to cover ground. About a mile up is a small wooded area known as Possum's Hollow Run Culvert, nestled right past the twin lakes that shimmer in the morning light. The trees there stand tall, casting long shadows over the canal, and the water flows quietly beneath the culvert, as if whispering the secrets of the land. This might not be close to the end of our journey, but it's a significant marker. It means that our travels through good old Indiana are concluding, and soon we'll cross into Ohio. There's always been something bittersweet about leaving Indiana behind. The land's familiar, its bends, its people, the rhythm of its towns and waterways. But as we approach Possum's Hollow, there's an excitement in the air. It's the signal that we're about to begin a new leg of the journey. Once we pass the hollow, we'll enter the Ohio stretch of the canal, where the landscape changes and the businesses ahead grows more intense. Each mile closer to Cincinnati brings a mixture of anticipation and the challenges of navigating busier waters. But the journey always carries a sense of adventure, even after all these years. Isaac stands next to me, staring ahead at the same eagerness I had at his age. I wonder what the future holds for him, for me, for the whiskey. But for now, there's only the canal, the barrels, and the journey ahead, and that's enough. I've always believed that good whiskey tells a story, and every barrel I send out there carries a little piece of mine. Lawrenceburg, the Whitewater Canal, my family's craft, it's all there, distilled down into something smooth and strong, something that'll last long after